I never thought I'd see my entire family turn against me in the span of a single afternoon, but there I was, standing in the hallway of my childhood home. Correction, my home, as the door to the living room slammed in my face. "This doesn't concern you, Charlie," my brother Robert had said with that condescending tone he'd perfected over the years. The same tone he used when he told me I was wasting my time at art school, or when he criticized my decision to move back home to care for Dad in his final months. The hushed voices behind the closed door made my blood boil. Attorney Matthews was in there reading Dad's will, and somehow I, the one who had actually been here, who had actually cared for our father, was deemed unworthy to participate. I paced the hallway, my fingers tracing the familiar pattern of the wallpaper Mom had chosen 20 years ago. The house still smelled faintly of Dad's pipe tobacco, though he hadn't smoked in years, before the cancer diagnosis, before everything changed. My sister Elaine had flown in from Seattle, her husband Todd in tow. They hadn't visited once during Dad's illness. Robert lived just 40 minutes away in Boston, but only showed up when it was convenient, usually when he needed something, and yet here they all were, divvying up the family assets while I stood in the hallway like an unwelcome guest. I leaned against the wall, remembering the late nights sitting with Dad, reading to him when his eyes grew too tired, adjusting his pillows when the pain kept him awake. I remembered the promises we'd made to each other, the conversations we'd had about the future of this house, my future in this house. "He wants you to have it, Charlie," Dad had said one evening, his voice barely a whisper. This place was always meant for the one who loved it most. The memory gave me strength. I straightened my back and marched toward the door, determined to claim my rightful place at the table. That's when I noticed the envelope that had slipped from my jacket pocket. I bent down to retrieve it, my heart racing as I recognized Dad's handwriting on the front. "For Charlie, when the time comes." With trembling hands, I opened it, pulling out a folded document. As I unfolded the paper, something fell to the floor with a soft clink. I picked it up, a house key on a familiar leather keychain, worn with age. Then my eyes fell on the document in my hands, and I nearly dropped it in shock. It was a deed to the house, in my name, dated 6 months ago, signed by Dad, notarized and completely legal. While my siblings were inside arguing over who deserved what, I was standing in the hallway holding irrefutable proof that the house was already mine. I read through the document again, making sure I wasn't misunderstanding. There it was, in black and white. Transfer of deed to Charlotte Elizabeth Pearson. My full name, the address of the house, everything spelled out in perfect legal language. At the bottom of the deed was a handwritten note. "Charlie, you were always the heart of this home. Now it's yours, in name as well as spirit. Don't let them push you around. Love, Dad." I felt a confusing mixture of emotions. Vindication, grief, anger, and an overwhelming sense of love for my father. Even from beyond the grave, he was looking out for me, ensuring that I wouldn't be steamrolled by my more aggressive siblings. As I stood there, clutching the deed with white knuckles, the living room door swung open. Robert emerged, his face flushed with what I assumed was victory. "Well, it's settled," he announced, not even bothering to look me in the eye. "The house will be sold, and we'll split the proceeds 3 ways. Matthews suggested we put it on the market next week." Behind him, Elaine was already on her phone, probably researching real estate values in the area. Todd was making small talk with the attorney, who was packing up his briefcase with an air of finality. I cleared my throat. "Actually, there's been a change of plans." Robert finally looked at me, irritation clear in his eyes. "What are you talking about?" I held up the deed, my hand steadier than I expected it to be. "The house isn't going on the market because it's not yours to sell. It's mine." The silence that followed was delicious. Robert's face went from red to white in an instant. Elaine lowered her phone, her perfectly manicured eyebrows shooting up toward her hairline. "What kind of nonsense is this?" Robert sputtered, reaching for the deed. I pulled it back. "Not nonsense. A legally binding transfer of ownership signed by Dad 6 months ago." Attorney Matthews paused in his packing, suddenly interested. "May I see that, Ms. Pearson?" I handed him the document, watching as he examined it carefully. His eyebrows rose slightly, and he nodded. "This appears to be in order," he said slowly. "I wasn't aware Joseph had done this." "This is ridiculous," Elaine cut in. "Dad wouldn't have given Charlie the entire house without telling us, wouldn't he?" I asked quietly. "When was the last time either of you called him? Visited him? Asked him what he wanted?" The guilt that flashed across their faces was answer enough. Matthews cleared his throat. "I'll need to verify this document, of course, but if it's legitimate, and I have no reason to believe it isn't, then Ms. Pearson is correct. The house belongs to her." Robert's face contorted with rage. "This is unacceptable." Dad wasn't thinking clearly in his final months. "Charlie obviously took advantage. Be very careful about what you say next," I interrupted, my voice low but firm. "I was here. Every day. Every night. Where were you?" The question hung in the air, unanswered and damning. In that moment, looking at the shocked and angry faces of my siblings, I realized that Dad's gift wasn't just the house. It was the courage to stand up for myself, to claim what was rightfully mine, to be the person he always knew I could be. I slipped the key into my pocket, feeling its weight against my leg. It felt right. It felt like coming home. The weeks following the will reading were a blur of legal consultations and family chaos. Robert, predictably, threatened to contest the deed. Elaine vacillated between tearful phone calls about what Dad would have wanted and icy silence. I weathered it all with a newfound resilience, anchored by the knowledge that I was standing exactly where Dad intended me to be. Attorney Matthews confirmed what I already knew. The deed was legitimate and ironclad. Dad had planned this carefully, ensuring that his wishes couldn't be undermined. "Your father was quite explicit about his intentions," Matthews told me during our follow-up meeting. He knew exactly what he was doing. What I didn't expect was the additional envelope Matthews handed me that day. "Joseph asked me to give you this 1 month after his passing," he explained. "Said you'd need time to settle in first." The envelope contained a letter and a small brass key that I didn't recognize. I waited until I was alone in Dad's, my study to read it. "My dearest Charlie, if you're reading this, then Matthews has done as instructed, and you've successfully claimed your rightful place in our home. I'm sorry for the drama this has likely caused with your siblings, but we both know they would never have accepted my decision if I'd announced it while I was alive. There's something I need to tell you, something I've never shared with Robert or Elaine. The brass key enclosed will open the hidden compartment in the basement behind the old boiler. What you find there will explain everything. I love you, kiddo. You're stronger than you know." "Dad," I sat there, the letter in one hand and the small key in the other, my mind racing. A hidden compartment? What could Dad possibly have kept hidden that would explain everything? The basement had always been Dad's domain. His workshop, his retreat. As children, we were allowed down there only with supervision. As adults, none of us spent much time there except Dad. During his illness, it had remained largely untouched. I made my way down the creaking stairs, flipping on the fluorescent lights that buzzed to life reluctantly. The basement smelled of sawdust and motor oil, a comforting scent that instantly brought back memories of watching Dad work on his various projects. The old boiler hulked in the corner, a relic from the 1960s that somehow still functioned. It took me nearly 20 minutes of searching before I found it, a small, almost imperceptible keyhole set into the concrete wall behind the boiler. My hands trembled slightly as I inserted the brass key and turned it. A section of the wall, which I now realized was actually a disguised door, swung inward with a soft groan. The space beyond was small, no larger than a closet, but what it contained took my breath away. Shelves lined the walls, filled with notebooks, folders, and boxes. In the center sat a small fireproof safe. I pulled out the nearest notebook and opened it. Inside, in Dad's precise handwriting, were columns of numbers, dates, and notations. Financial records spanning decades. As I flipped through more notebooks, a picture began to emerge, one that made my heart race and my mind reel. Dad had been secretly wealthy, not just comfortable, but genuinely, substantially wealthy. Property investments, stock portfolios, business ventures, all meticulously documented and managed without any of us knowing. The Joseph Pearson we knew, the high school science teacher who clipped coupons and drove the same car for 15 years, had been sitting on a fortune. The safe contained the most shocking revelation of all: trust documents establishing separate funds for each of us children. Robert and Elaine each had trusts worth several $1,000,000 to be revealed and distributed on their 40th birthdays. Robert had turned 40 just last year, which meant my hands flew to my mouth as I realized the truth. Robert already knew. He'd received his inheritance and hadn't said a word to any of us. No wonder he'd been so desperate to sell the house. He didn't need the money, but he couldn't bear the thought of me getting more than him. My own trust was different. Instead of a lump sum, Dad had set up a foundation in my name, the Charlotte Pearson Arts Foundation, endowed with enough money to establish a significant grant program for young artists struggling to make ends meet, just like I had been before, moving home to care for him. Attached to the foundation documents was another note. Charlie, you never cared about money the way your siblings did. You cared about making a difference. This foundation is your chance to do that on a scale you never imagined possible. The house is your base of operations, your home and the headquarters for the foundation. I've always believed in your vision. Now you'll have the means to bring it to life. P.S. There's one more thing. Check the bottom drawer of my desk upstairs. The combination is your birthday. I sat on the cold concrete floor, surrounded by evidence of a life my father had kept hidden from all of us, and wept. Not from grief this time, but from overwhelming gratitude and love. Even now, Dad was teaching me, guiding me, believing in me. When I finally composed myself, I carefully replaced everything except the foundation documents and made my way back upstairs to Dad's desk. The bottom drawer had a small combination lock that I'd never paid much attention to. I entered my birthday, 0217, and heard the satisfying click as it unlocked. Inside was a single manila envelope. Within that, a manuscript, hundreds of pages bound together with an elastic band. The title page read, The Science of Dreams, A Teacher's Journey Through the Cosmos of the Mind, by Joseph Pearson. Dad had written a book no one knew about. I stayed up all night reading it, an extraordinary blend of memoir, scientific exploration, and philosophy that charted Dad's lifetime fascination with the intersection of science and human consciousness. It was brilliant, accessible, and deeply moving. The final chapter had been completed just weeks before his death. In the morning, bleary-eyed but filled with purpose, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to a literary agent whose name I recognized from Dad's contacts list in the hidden room. The second was to an attorney specializing in nonprofit law. By noon, I had appointments with both. By the end of the week, Dad's book had sparked a bidding war between publishers, and the Charlotte Pearson Arts Foundation had filed its incorporation papers. When Robert called the following Monday, his voice dripping with false concern about my mental state, and suggesting again that selling the house would be best for everyone, I cut him off mid-sentence. I know about the trust fund, Robert, I said quietly. I know about everything. The silence on the other end was deafening. Dad's book will be published next spring, I continued, and the foundation launches in January. You and Elaine are welcome to attend the opening gala, of course. I'll send formal invitations. I hung up before he could respond. For the first time in my life, I felt completely free of the need for my siblings' approval or understanding. I had work to do, important work that Dad had entrusted to me. The house wasn't just my home anymore. It was the beginning of a legacy. 6 months after discovering Dad's secret fortune and manuscript, my life had transformed beyond recognition. The Charlotte Pearson Arts Foundation had gone from concept to reality with remarkable speed, aided by the unexpected publicity surrounding Dad's book. The Science of Dreams had become that rarest of literary phenomena, a scientific memoir that captured the public imagination and climbed bestseller lists worldwide. I'd converted the ground floor of the house into the foundation's headquarters, maintaining the original architectural features while creating a functional, welcoming space for staff and grant recipients. My own living quarters occupied the upper floor, a private retreat from the whirlwind my life had become. The foundation's mission, providing living stipends and health care to emerging artists, had struck a chord in a cultural moment when creative careers seemed increasingly unsustainable. Applications flooded in, and our first cohort of grant recipients reflected a diversity of disciplines, backgrounds, and visions that would have made Dad proud. Robert and Elaine had reacted to these developments in predictably different ways. Robert maintained a stony silence, though I occasionally spotted him driving slowly past the house, observing the renovations and activity with an unreadable expression. Elaine, surprisingly, had reached out after reading Dad's book, her voice tearful on the phone. "I never really knew him, did I?" she'd said. "Any of you, really." It was the beginning of a fragile reconciliation. Not forgiveness exactly, but an acknowledgement that perhaps we could build something new from the ashes of our fractured family relationships. Today, however, all thoughts of family drama were pushed aside by the Foundation's first major public event, a gallery opening featuring works by our inaugural grant recipients. The house hummed with activity as caterers, staff, and artists prepared for the evening ahead. I stood in what had once been our family living room, now transformed into an elegant gallery space, watching as the final pieces were hung with precision. Mia Chen, our foundation director, a former gallery curator with a razor-sharp mind and boundless energy, approached with her ever-present tablet. "The Times critic just confirmed he's coming," she said, swiping through her emails. "And we've got RSVPs from 3 major collectors. Not bad for our first rodeo." I smiled, feeling a now familiar mixture of excitement and imposter syndrome. Dad would be amazed by all this. From what I've learned about Joseph Pearson, I think he knew exactly what he was setting in motion, Mia replied, her expression softening. "This wasn't luck, Charlie. He chose you for this because he knew what you could do with it." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text message that made my heart skip. "I'm outside. Are you sure about this invitation? Robert, here. Now." "I need 5 minutes," I told Mia, already moving toward the front door. He was standing on the porch, looking distinctly uncomfortable in a suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. His hair was grayer than I remembered from our last encounter. "You came," I said, unable to keep the surprise from my voice. Robert shifted his weight, hands in his pockets. "Your formal invitation was persuasive." I'd sent embossed invitations to both siblings, including a personal note expressing my genuine desire for their presence, despite our differences. I'd never expected Robert to actually show up. "I've been following the Foundation's progress," he continued, his eyes taking in the transformed facade of our childhood home, "and Dad's book. It's remarkable. Would you like a tour?" I offered, holding the door open. "Before everyone else arrives?" He hesitated, then nodded once, sharply. I led him through the house, explaining the renovations and the Foundation's work. He asked surprisingly thoughtful questions about the grant selection process and the support systems we were putting in place for recipients. When we reached Dad's study, the one room I'd kept almost exactly as it had been, Robert stopped abruptly. "I was jealous," he said, the words seeming to surprise him as much as they surprised me. "Not of the house, or even the money, really. I was jealous that he trusted you with his real self, that he let you see who he really was." I leaned against the doorframe, studying my brother's profile. "He tried with all of us, Robert, in different ways. I didn't let him," Robert admitted, running a finger along the spines of Dad's beloved science books. "I was too busy trying to prove I didn't need his approval." The irony hung between us, unspoken, but acknowledged. "Would you like to see something?" I asked, moving to Dad's desk. I unlocked the bottom drawer and removed a folder I hadn't shown anyone yet, not even Mia. Inside were letters, dozens of them, written by Dad over decades but never sent. Letters to each of his children, documenting his thoughts, his pride, his worries, his love. "There are 26 addressed to you," I said, handing Robert the stack with his name. "And 22 for Elaine. I've been reading mine one at a time, saving them like chapters in an ongoing conversation." Robert took the letters with unsteady hands. "Why show me these now?" I considered the question carefully. Because tonight isn't just about launching the Foundation or celebrating these artists. It's about honoring Dad's vision of connection between science and art, between ideas and emotions, between people who've lost their way back to each other. Robert's expression cracked slightly, revealing something raw and vulnerable beneath his carefully maintained facade. "I don't know if I deserve this." "It's not about deserving," I said softly. That's what I've learned from all this. Dad didn't give me the house because I deserved it more. He gave it to me because he knew what I would do with it. What we could all do with it together. A noise from downstairs indicated that guests had begun to arrive. Robert carefully tucked the letters into his inside jacket pocket. I should let you get back to your event, he said, his businessman's mask sliding back into place, though not quite as firmly as before. Stay, I said, surprising myself with the earnestness in my voice. Meet the artists. See what your family's legacy is becoming. Something shifted in Robert's eyes. A softening, a considering. Elaine mentioned she might come too, with the kids. I saved them seats in the front row, I admitted. The hint of a genuine smile touched Robert's lips. Always the prepared one. As we descended the stairs together, I felt a sense of completion I hadn't expected. The house had come full circle, from family home to battlefield to something new and hopeful. Not perfect, not healed, but transforming. The main gallery was filling with people, artists, patrons, press, and in the corner, looking somewhat overwhelmed but definitely present, Elaine and her teenage twins. When she spotted Robert and me coming down the stairs together, her eyes widened in genuine shock. Welcome to the Charlotte Pearson Arts Foundation, I said to the gathering crowd, my voice steady and clear, though perhaps it would be more accurate to call it the Joseph Pearson legacy. My father believed that art and science were not opposing forces, but complementary ways of understanding our world. He believed in supporting those brave enough to create in a world that often undervalues creation. And most of all, he believed in the power of home, not just as a physical space, but as a foundation from which we can grow, explore, and eventually return to, changed but always connected. As I spoke, I felt Dad's presence not as a ghost or a memory, but as a continuation, a thread woven through the fabric of what was unfolding here. The deed to the house had been just the beginning, a key unlocking not just property, but possibility. Later that night, after the speeches and the toasts, after the critics had made their notes and the collectors had made their purchases, after Elaine's twins had surprised everyone with their insightful questions for the artists, I found myself alone in the kitchen, the one room that remained almost exactly as it had been when we were children. I ran my hands along the familiar countertop where Dad had taught me to make his famous Sunday pancakes, where we'd had so many late-night conversations during his illness, where he'd first hinted at the legacy he planned to leave. I think we did it, Dad, I whispered to the quiet room. We turned the house into a home again. And somewhere, in the creaking of the old floorboards and the gentle hum of the refrigerator, I could almost hear his reply, I never doubted you would, Charlie. Not for a moment.